Well, hey, everybody, welcome. We are going to talk about how to build the guardrails your AI releases actually need. Welcome and thanks for joining. My name's Aaron Newcomb. I'll do a little intro in a minute, but please note that we will be taking questions throughout. So if you have a question comes up randomly at a given section, don't hold back. Go ahead and open that question box in the tool and go ahead and fill it out anytime you want. Have it ready so you can be asking those questions. And I will get to those at the end if I don't see them as I'm going through here. So please do that. Anyway, my name's Aaron Newcomb. I work for Harness. I work on our feature management and experimentation product. That product came from Split. You might remember Split a while back was acquired about a little over a year ago, was acquired by Harness, and we've now integrated that into our platform. And I'm going to show you some ways that that integration is luckily helping to deal with this problem of AI coded feature velocity coming our way. So let's go ahead and get right into it, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about today. So I've done, kind of the introduction here, but we're going to talk about some AI implications. I think this will resonate with most people. Every customer I talk to is dealing with this problem. So I think this will be really good for us to talk about today. And then I'll give you a little bit of an overview of Harness, not really going into too much detail, but Harness does so much, and I want to make sure we're focused on just the elements that I'm going to be focusing on today. I'll also give you a little bit of an overview of continuous delivery and feature flags, what the differences are, how they come together, and then, of course, how they come together to solve this particular problem. We'll talk a lot about guardrails and validation. I don't want to give that one away too much, but those are the two areas we're going to focus on to kind of fix some of the issues we're having right now due to AI generated code. And then I'll give you some resources. And of course, at the end, there'll be time for a few more questions. So like I said, don't hesitate. Don't wait till the end to ask them. Go ahead and ask your questions as we go through here. That's the best way to do it. And I think we'll also have a poll here at some point to try to see where everyone is at on this spectrum of how they're dealing with this problem too. So let's just go ahead and get into it. So when I talk about, the problems with AI-driven code workflows, what am I talking about? Well, in talking to customers, and I think industry-wide, even if you just read the news around what's going on with AI, I think it's clear that people are okay with the coding and some of the review part of the process. So people are using Claude, people are using Copilot, people are using Cursor, they're using ChatGPT. They can produce code quickly, and companies have been very willing to give people the tools that they need. They're not holding back on any of this, right? In fact, most people are encouraging people to use the tools that they are that they want, right? They're not. It's like, no, you need to use more tokens. Some people are being measured on that, I think. So the coding part is pretty well taken care of. People are really excited to use those tools. No problem there. Now, what happens? We start developing more and more code. We start creating more and more features that we want to release. Things are going great. Things are looking great. But then we get to the point where we need to roll these things out. And what happens to the size of our deployments? They explode, right? So you may have had a deployment in the past with, I don't know, 5, 10 features or something like that. We're seeing 4 to 20 times the number of changes being pushed out the door, or at least through the process that we were seeing before. And we all know what happens when we have an increased number of things changing at any given time. That opens up the risk that something's going to go wrong. So we have to start focusing on testing and deployment a bit more. And we can turn some of that over to AI, but as I'll show you in a minute, there are some easy ways to also mitigate some of the problems that happen when you do that. And then last but not least, we have release and experimentation. And this last part of the puzzle is where you actually want to use something like feature flags or an experimentation tool to validate that those changes that you have made with AI are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, and especially not causing a problem with either a security vulnerability or an impact to your user experience, right? So that seems to be where we want to concentrate on improving at this point. And why do I say that? Well, we actually did a survey recently, and we asked real users about how they're dealing with this problem, and we got back some really interesting results. And hang on till the end because I'm going to give you a link that you can use to download this particular report and read all the findings, not just the highlighted ones I've pulled out here. So in that report, what did we find? Well, we found that a lot of people still need human review for every single line of AI generated code. And if you're writing a lot more code, but you still need a human to review every line of it, that's not very efficient. And it might look like your code development engine is running great, but you're still not getting those features out into the wild at the rate that you would like to. We also found that less than half of people have put in AI guardrails for AI generated code. This could be a real problem. We've all seen stories in the news where somebody didn't have a guardrail in place and they deleted their code base or they deleted customer orders or what have you. And the AI just went ahead and did it. And, it was like, oh, sorry, my bad. And that's not good enough in this day and age. Now, what we did see was we saw that 58% of people are running more experiments. This is a good thing in one way, which is they're trying to keep up with um, running more experiments because they have more features. But the problem is their systems may not be able to really support all those extra running experiments because they're not efficient enough or they're not geared to that volume. We really should be running experiments on every feature that we release, or that should be the exception is when we don't do it, right? And last but not least, only 36% said AI had improved the quality of their software. Again, sort of similar to the first point in that you need to go back and actually review things, or the results aren't quite up to what you thought they would be, right? You thought that the quality of software would be great. Turns out there's bugs that are getting into the mix, and hopefully you're catching those either in test or behind a feature flag so you can turn those off quickly. So, a lot of really interesting results. Again, I'll give you the link for this when we get to the resources at the end, or they'll be in the resources of your when you after the webinar when you get the resources in your email. Okay, well, let's take a. I'm really curious to know how everyone on the call is doing with this, and so let's just do a quick poll and see what you're doing. It should have popped up on your screen now, and the poll says, "How mature is your team's use of AI in the SDLC?" So go ahead and fill out that poll. The choices are, you're not using it all. Maybe you're using it for, a few people are experimenting with AI. Maybe you're using it, but it's supervised. Maybe AI is integrated with guardrails, and maybe no humans are involved anymore. So go ahead and vote on those options and let me know where you're at in your journey here, your AI journey in deploying and releasing new features with AI. While we're doing that, I can tell you that in talking to a few folks, we found out that um, some people have gone a little too fast here. So I was talking to one Fortune 500 company recently, and they gave everybody all the tools they need, and they didn't put in any guardrails. And what they found were that people were so used to using AI. And I'm sure many of you have seen this. I have myself, where you start to trust the AI maybe a little too much, and they had bugs creeping in, and because the demand was so high on the developers, they weren't actually reviewing anything, and they were just hitting, "Yep, looks okay. Go ahead and do that build or commit that code." And bugs were creeping in, so they had to go back to a much more manual code review process. Um, and so we are seeing that as well. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and take a look at the results of the poll. So, it looks like most everybody is right in the middle here. AI is used but not supervised. So people are still struggling with this problem. They're trying to use AI in the SDLC, but they're not actually able to get all the way to, the nirvana, I guess, if you want to say, where no humans are involved anymore. But yeah, about 43% of you are right in the middle where you're using AI, but still very much supervised. A good portion of you, about a little less than a third, are actually using AI with integrated guardrails, and then the rest are still experimenting. So, very interesting and very much on par with the other times that I've asked these questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to how do we solve the problem, right? That's what the bulk of this is going to be about. So we're not going to focus on the coding problem because you all are really good about giving tools to your developers to code with. Let's focus on the testing and deployment and release and experimentation phases of doing your of releasing new features, right? And so I thought we would tackle this in two different ways, right? For the testing and deployment and release and experimentation phases, we're going to be talking about how to set guardrails, what kind of guardrails or should be in place, and then also how to validate when you've actually released a feature. So validation is super important here. I've talked to some companies that basically have I won't say dictated because they haven't quite gone that far, but what they've said is the goal, what they're measuring against is whether they're running an experiment on every single feature release. Super important. And also, as part of that validation comes what I'm calling for now codification, or that last part of the process where you need to go in and clean up your code. So, because I work with feature flags, I'm going to show you an example of how you can go clean up feature flag code as well. All right. Before I get into those two things, I do want to just set the stage here and tell you a little bit about what I'm going to be using. Obviously, I come from Harness, so I'm going to be talking about our tools here. You may have other tools, that's totally fine. Maybe you've got a DIY approach, whatever applies to you, but I just want to let you know my context for this. So, Harness has built basically an AI foundation, if you will, with agentic workflows, software delivery knowledge graph in the middle that pulls in information from different areas so it has context, and then also intelligent workflow orchestration. Um, and that results in not just feature flags, but a bunch of different products that we sell. We have products for velocity, we have products for reliability, we have products for security, and we have products for efficiency, including things like cloud cost management. And so we're not going to be talking about all of this today. We're really going to only be talking about continuous delivery and feature management and experimentation. Although I'll throw a little plug in there for security too, because we can never forget that. But those are the two areas I'm going to be focusing on today. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about continuous delivery, and then I'll talk a little bit about feature flags in a minute. But I want to make sure that people understand the difference between the two tools and how they apply here, right? So with continuous delivery, I mean, that's pretty much what people know Harness for. That's our bread and butter. That's where we started. Um, And with continuous delivery, obviously you build your software, you test your software, and you deploy your software, and you deploy it, as one big deployment. And that deployment could be an update to your application, and it has a number of features underneath, right? So you've got all your features baked into that deployment. You throw it over the fence, and then when it comes time to do deployment testing, maybe you do a canary deployment where you can actually deploy it to a small subset of your users. You do your canary, you see how things are going, and then at some point when things look good, you can basically deploy to everybody, right? So that's kind of the typical way things work with CD. However, if something goes wrong with the CD deployment, what happens is you have to do a rollback. Now, Harness has tools to make automatic rollbacks very easy and painless, at least compared to doing them manually, but it still means rolling back all those features that you just put out. So whoever's been exposed to those features, that 10, 20% or something, is going to notice maybe a little bit of a difference across even the features that weren't affected by wherever this problem took place. This problem may have taken place downstream in a small feature somewhere that was causing a security vulnerability, but you had to roll back everything, right? And take those features kind of away for a little while until you can fix things and roll them out again. Um, it's great to have automated tools for that, but it is can be kind of painful to go through that process. With feature flags, we can do things a little bit differently. So we can still do our deployment, our big deployment, but if you bake feature flags in, then you can treat each one of these features as an if-else statement in your code. And if the feature flag is turned on, then you can roll this out to a very small subset. Most people start at just 1%. I know I say 10 and 20 to make things nice round numbers here, but typically people will roll this out to just 1% of your segment that you're targeting. Maybe it's a particular region. Maybe it's power users. Maybe uh, who knows, right? What your segment are, a region or something like that, or maybe a platform that you're rolling this out to. And you can do this one at a time. And so what happens is if you have a similar problem where you've rolled out a small feature, one of the small features in your deployment to your power users or your premium users, and they start having a problem, you can turn that flag off without having to do a rollback. You can just turn off that individual flag. The rest of your deployment is unaffected. And you've essentially rolled back instantly to the previous state of your code because of the way this works. So feature flags can do all that. Now, what feature flags can't do is they can't redeploy your entire application. They can't roll back that entire update out all at one time for you, but they can mitigate the risk of a small subset of that deployment causing a problem where you would have to roll everything back. So the best of both worlds here are to use both, right? You use CD to go ahead and do those deployments, and then you use feature flags to one at a time deal with each one of these features. Now, why is this important? Why am I talking about all this? Well, it's because of that first problem I talked about before, where you have 20 times the amount of features that you have to release at any one given time. So we're trying to solve that problem of things going wrong in that huge amount of features, right, that we have now. Not just one, not two, but maybe 20 things, maybe 100 things that we rolled out at one go. And we need to be able to have a way to deal with the increased amount of exposure that we have so that when something goes wrong, we don't have to roll all of that back. We can just roll one at a time. And that certainly helps us mitigate that risk to a certain extent. So by combining these two things, it's really the best of both worlds. Now, let me give you a more practical example. Maybe you have a mobile app, right? And this is an example of a banking app, My Bank. Who else banks at My Bank? I open all my accounts there. Um, but you can imagine there's all this competition out there, right? You can see some of the logos over there on the right. Everyone is vying for eyeballs. Everyone is trying to come up with a feature that will get their customers or their potential customers to open more bank accounts or use their app more. And that's another great example of how you can use feature flags and deployments together as one combined way to deal with this AI code velocity problem. As I mentioned, in the process of doing one single deployment, you may have 180 features kind of tucked behind there that you're turning on one at a time. You're probably experimenting with a subset of those, although again, I would argue you should be experimenting with almost all of them to know what's actually impacting the bottom line. And then when you once those features are validated, you've run your experiments, you know that they work, then the banking app, the next time it gets a deployment to the next version, all those things are codified in the code and they become standard features, not behind a feature flag anymore. And that's the way that a lot of people use these tools. Okay, so let's now talk about pipelines real quick. Pipelines is people have deployment pipelines. It's kind of a generic term, but at Harness it means something a little bit more. We have our own pipelines feature of the product. The nice thing about it is it spans multiple different products that we sell, right? It's not just one tool for one product. It actually integrates, for example, with feature flags. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. What this allows you to do is it allows you to very easily, you can set this up with YAML if you want. You can very easily deploy pipelines and do things in an automated fashion with guardrails. And I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. So you can see here we're doing a manual verification check, which looks like it failed in this case in the graphic, right? So we're doing some sort of verification. Maybe there was a security problem or something like that. Some sort of verification happened, and that was to protect us against releasing code that was generated by AI, but may have a problem with it, and we don't want to release that into production yet. So it's a great time to do these checks. It's a great time to have these checks in your pipeline. So we'll be talking a lot about pipelines as we finish out the presentation today. Okay, so we talked about guardrails and validation. I'm going to talk about those separately. So what are the guardrails? What do guardrails even mean? What are we talking about? Well, my definition for guardrails are the controls that decide whether AI-generated code and AI-assisted changes are allowed to advance. So you're going to be making these things, but the question is, at what point do we do a hard check to know if things are going right or if things are going wrong? Because nobody wants to end up in the news for a security vulnerability that leaked out, right? Okay, well, what are three ways we can deal with that? What are three types of guardrails we can put up? Well, one, we can put up human judgment. That would be kind of a human in the loop problem where we might not need humans evaluating every line of code, whether it's correct or not, but at least we need some human checking to make sure that this pull request, for example, meets our standards or isn't going to break something before it goes into production. Also, we need some sort of security evidence. So we need to do some sort of test. And this also gets down to a little bit of regulatory environments as well, right? You need an audit trail, but we'll talk about application security mostly here. You need some sort of security check to make sure that you don't have a vulnerability. And then you need policy enforcement because AI is really good about coming up with its own workarounds for things. You know this if you've used it, and it'll say, well, I just created my own naming scheme for this thing, right? Well, no, if you're working at a company with 1,000 people, you need a naming scheme that's consistent across things so that the incident team knows what's going on if there's a problem or whatever. So you need some sort of way to enforce policies. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to tell you how we do it at Harness. You can think about your own products that you use when you're thinking about this, but let's talk about policy as code first, and then we'll work backwards. So as I said, you need some sort of policy enforcement. The way that we do it at Harness is with OPA style policies. So we actually have a policy. When you go in to create a policy, we have examples that you can use, and we show you the code. I always forget what the name of the OPA standard is for writing policies, but we use that same standard to make it easy for people. So you don't have to worry about if you don't want to take these policies to somewhere else later, they'll still be valid. And you can actually test them. You can go in here and if you set up a policy, let's use the same example where I have a naming convention that needs to be standardized on, and I'm setting up that policy, you can actually go in and test, put in a bad policy and a good policy and see if the policy enforcement works. And here's an example of that enforcement. So we're running our pipeline. We're running the create feature flag step in our pipeline, which happens automatically as the pipeline progresses. And we get to this point and it says, hey, you've got a bad name in here. You've used the name Ola, which doesn't require a Jira ticket number. So in this case, the company wanted to have the Jira ticket number when as part of the feature flag name. Again, I think this is probably for, let's say this goes to an incident team, they need to be able to turn this off because something happened. You want to have that Jira ticket available to you. And so why not just put it right in the name of the flag? Makes a lot of sense. And you can enforce that across your entire organization with policies. So that's the first one. The second one is human in the loop. How do we do that? Or when do we use it, right? Well, you want to use it for approvals for production. And some people are going right to production to run certain tests, right? Especially with their user interface, with their user experience. They want to do that in production. But before something goes to production, you certainly want to have at least somebody that is familiar with the code to go through and make sure that's not going to break something else, right? What about high risk services, financial transactions, or regulated data that needs to be handled differently? Unusual deployment patterns. So you've all been through this where you're starting up a new service, maybe in the cloud or something, you haven't done it before. You definitely want to have somebody validating that to make sure that things are right there as well. And then, of course, if you get to some sort of failed verification that I showed you before, right? We're trying to validate a feature, run a security check, something fails. You want to be able to have a human go in and investigate what's going on. So what do you use for that? How do you get notified that something's wrong? Well, if you're using a product like Harness that we've built in tools to basically integrate with whatever you're using, so you can obviously be notified. This is an example of an in-app notification where someone needs to go into Harness and put in, yes, I validated that each feature is working. Click approve, everything looks good, and then the pipeline will automatically continue if they hit approve at this point. But also you need to integrate with your existing ticketing tools or your incident systems that you have, your ServiceNows, et cetera, your PagerDuties, and messaging tools like Slack. Those are all ways that people use to make sure they're notified so that not only is there a stop, an automated stop in your pipeline to say, I need to go validate this particular part, but you're notified that you need to go do that in whatever system works for you. So really important to keep those in place. And we can't forget security testing. So we have application security testing tools. that can go out and, again, be integrated into these pipelines along with everything else. Really important here is deduping vulnerabilities. So one thing that we're seeing with AI code is if there is a vulnerability and you commit that to a centralized repo as part of a instruction set or something that's going to reproduce that vulnerability over and over again, those vulnerabilities can get propagated. So by having a security testing tool like we deliver at Harness, you can actually get in front of that and prevent those duplication of vulnerabilities by AI, which is super easy to do. Um, and then we also have remediation. So, enforcing that governance with those same OPA policies we talked about before, being able to track issues by integrating into Jira and Slack, for example. Same sort of notification stuff I was talking about before applies here. So you get notified immediately. You can go in and say, hey, you can ask our AI system, for example, I saw that there was a problem. What's going on? It can come back and pinpoint the problem for you so that you can uh, remediate it quickly. Super important to have this as a guardrail when you're rolling out AI generated code. Now let's talk a little bit about validation. Again, what do I mean by validation? Well, what I'm talking about here is the process of proving that a release is safe, useful, worth keeping. It's important. And codifying. Again, if you have a better word for that, let me know. I don't know what it is. Validating, codifying. Basically, you need to go in and fix your code or codify your code to the point where you've taken the feature flag out. The process that you validated is working and is important for your business is now in the next release, right? It's in the next deployment. So what are we talking about there? What kinds of things fall under validation? Well, for me, it's validating the release process itself. It's integrating this into the release process so that you can keep things moving quickly and you don't get bottlenecked with all of this AI-driven code that's coming your way. Experimentation, again, got to make sure that this stuff is impacting the bottom line or affecting your users in the way that you want. And then obviously tech debt is a big deal. Tech debt can increase right along with the number of changes that you're putting out due to AI-driven code velocity. That tech debt is also accelerating because of that as well. So if you're not taking steps to clean it up, you're going to run into problems. So let's first start about how we can deal with that release process and feature flags. I gave you all the examples of this. I'm not going to go into too much more detail here, but basically, you can think of it as, the last bullet here, limiting the blast radius, right? So one of the things that you want to do as you're releasing more and more features is to make sure that the impact, whatever impact you have, if there is a problem, that it's limited. It's limited to maybe your internal users only. Wouldn't that be great? You release this to internal users, have them take a look at it first. It's not going to catch everything, but it's certainly not going to land you in the newspaper or on your daily Google News feed, right? So not only that, but you can roll out progressively by user, by segment, by region, as I mentioned before. Doing a progressive rollout is much safer and can be much more effective than rolling out to everybody all at once. And then, of course, instant kill switches. That's a great way to look at feature flags. This whole area of feature flags has developed. It used to be really for, people that were wanted to open up a beta, for example, to some customers, and they would turn on the feature flag, and the customer in question would get the beta of a new feature or a new product or something like that, right? It's evolved much more since then, and now it's used to do all sorts of things, and especially to guard against problems when you're doing these AI, a lot more AI generated releases like this. Let's talk about experimentation as well. Is there a bottleneck with experimentation? Well, what we found is that for advanced experimentation teams, even if they've done everything right, so they've built up their experimentation team, they've created dashboards, they're doing dynamic configs, they're plugged into Warehouse Native, they've shared this learning experience across their team, they still hit a bottleneck. And the problem is exactly what we've been talking about. They build it to a point where maybe they're doing experiments weekly, but they can't get beyond that because they just can't run any more experiments any faster. And what we found the bottleneck is here is actually the same thing that we've been talking about, which is they aren't building the experimentation platform into the rest of their deployment pipeline. So if you're using a separate experimentation tool, that's fine. Just know that you may run into this bottleneck problem where you hit a certain ceiling and you're not able to keep up with the code velocity that's coming your way, especially if you're changing your expectation with experimentation to be experimenting on everything, right? Think about your experimentation teams here, right? They were maybe running, 10 experiments or something like that. Now they're running 100 experiments. How are they going to keep up with that? How are they going to automate that? It can be a real problem, and the best answer that we found is to make sure that the tools are integrated. Your experimentation tool, your feature flagging tool, your CI/CD tool, make sure all of those are integrated, and that will take out the bulk of the bottleneck because you can automate all the way through that whole pipeline. Now let's talk about removing tech debt. So again, I'm going to be focusing on feature flags here because that's my bread and butter. The point is you need to be doing this because it's going to come back and haunt you. Now, what we've done for feature flags is we've actually released an automated feature flag cleanup tool that will go out and it will, based on your guidelines, it will go out and automatically find feature flags that are, let's say in this case, 100% rolled out, right? So you don't want to be removing feature flags that haven't been fully released yet. So as you're ramping up, you don't want to be getting rid of that feature flag code. But what you can do is once it's been fully rolled out, the experiment is finished, you've proven the value of that particular feature, you can have this tool go ahead and run, and it will actually go in and identify in your code where those feature flags are and set up automated ways to actually pull that code out, and including, doing a PR for you on your behalf and things like that. We're always improving this feature. It's hot off the press, if you will. So we're getting a lot of feedback on it and a lot of good feedback. And this is something that we feel can really help people go in and clean up their code, because the last thing you want to have is old code hanging out in your code base that an AI tool can reference and perhaps make assumptions on your behalf that you don't want it making. So cleaning up this code is really important. Okay, let me give you an example of a company that's seen dramatic results by following the approach that I just laid out, right? Especially with the integrated pipelines, being able to automate things, having enough review in the loop, human review and guardrails and things like that, that they can move very, very quickly. So this is Speedway Motors. We've actually done another lead dev webinar with them. I'll give you a link to that in just a minute. But before they started using our tools, they were only releasing a couple times a month. That's as fast as they could do it. And because they didn't really have the right tools in place to run experiments to know what was impacting their e-commerce tools, the e-commerce product that they have, they weren't really able to see any increase in conversion rates when they did do testing or when they did release new features. So once they started using our tools, they found very quickly that they got immediate ROI because they were able to go from releasing 2 times a month to releasing multiple times per day, sometimes 2, 3 times per day. So their deployment frequency went way up. They were also able to see an immediate impact, and they were able to make judgments on whether new features were helping or hurting, and then move forward very quickly and get those changes in their code base and get them rolled out in the next deployment, which was really important. And they found that there was a big impact to the bottom line. Because they had the visibility that they needed, because they didn't have separate tools getting in the way of each other and a lot of delay, they were actually able to iterate quickly and say, hey, this particular special that we ran on the website or the way that we did this is actually causing people to order more stuff. And so we need to do that again and again, every year, seasonally, whatever it is, whatever the problem is. But they were able to validate that that was working, which is really great. Okay, let me go ahead and give you some resources now, things that you can take with you. These will be offered to you as well after the webinar, but I want to talk about a few things. So coming up on June 17th is our annual flagship event that we do at Harness. Split used to do this before we acquired them, and we've kept it going. And it's special because this isn't just us talking to you about what we think. What we do is we actually go out and get actual practitioners and have them come in, practitioners that are doing incredible things, and they talk about the problems that they're facing, and they talk about how they're solving them, whether it's with Harness or not. It doesn't matter. We have some folks coming in from Cursor to talk about the AI revolution and what that means. We've got some folks coming in from some financial institutions, some retail companies. They're coming in to talk about how they're dealing with this AI velocity problem, what they've put in place, how they're running experiments, how they're cleaning up their code. All of that is going to get talked about by practitioners. So you can go out and sign up for this. Just do a Google search for Harness Flagship. 2026 should come up, and you can register for that event. And be sure to register, even if you can't attend the whole thing. It's free, it's virtual. You can listen to it in the background. But if you get pulled away or whatever, you'll have the replays available to come back and listen to as well. I don't think you're going to want to miss it, and definitely go out and register for that event. I also mentioned this report that we put out along with lead dev. So there'll be a link to download that report. I recommend going out and doing that and kind of seeing where you fit in. I can tell by your poll responses that you're going to fit right in with the responses on this survey. But there are some interesting takeaways. And we also talked about this in a little bit more detail on a webinar called De-risking Releases in the AI Era. And so I think I was on that one. And we talked about what the implications are. We kind of drilled into some of the details, some of the findings from that report in a webinar fashion. So again, great listening material if you're working or doing something around the house and you want to hear the output of that report and what the implications are. Highly recommend that one. And I talked about Speedway Motors. We also have that webinar. You can go back and listen to them. Again, practitioners. These are the people from Speedway Motors that implemented these things. Definitely go out and take a look if you're interested. One of the things they talked about, which I did not realize until we were on that webinar talking about it, was they even control some of their physical resources through feature flags. So I think the example was they control their warehouses. If there's inclement weather and the warehouses shouldn't be running, they actually flip a feature flag to turn off the warehouse, which is amazing to me. But it's an easy way for them to control some of those things in the physical world as well as in their application. And last but not least, if you want a demo of any of these things, if any of these topics that we talked about through guardrails and validation, if any of those are problems for you right now and you just want a demo of how it would work that's more specific to your particular use case or the problem that you're facing, you can scan this QR code or just go out to the website and sign up for a demo. Highly recommend you do that. There's no cost, no risk. We'll just ask you a few questions. We'll get on the phone and we'll walk through the product in a way that's more applicable to you. So go sign up for that demo. And I'd love to see some of the folks on this call actually in the future, perhaps on a demo call. That would be great. All right. So for now, let's go ahead and get over to some questions. See if I can bring up my Q&A here. This is the time if you do have any questions, go ahead and put them in now. We'll take a few more minutes. I do have one. Do you support rolling back database changes? Yes, we do, actually. We can help with, we actually have a tool called DB DevOps. And the DB DevOps tool, I have to be careful because I want to say DevOps, the DB DevOps tool actually can help you rolling back your DB changes or doing schema migrations. It's not my particular uh, uh, product that I work on, but I do know that we do have it. It does integrate with the pipeline process that I showed you before. So as part of your process, you're rolling out a new feature, you need to move someone over or do some sort of a database change, you can actually build that into the pipeline and have it happen automatically. I'll give it just one more second to see if there's more questions that come in. One of the interesting ones that came in last time when I was talking about this was, how do I convince my management that this part of the process is important? That can be a struggle right now. I think a lot of people are focusing on the code development side of things and how many tokens you're using and how much code you're pushing out. But they're starting to realize that that code doesn't always make it all the way out into production because of this deployment problem that we've been talking about and the release and experimentation problem that happens down the line. It's not just that you're developing more code, it's that you're doing more changes and you need to be running experiments on more stuff. So if you don't have a good tool especially if you're running at a large organization with thousands of developers. If you don't have a good tool to help you with the rest of the process, um, you could be in for a world of hurt, and you might not get the results that the executives want to see. You might get the results that your manager wants to see, but the executives might not be too pleased that there's all these changes backed up in the pipeline. Um, let's just see if there's anything else. Let's see. How do you put in guardrails for safe handling PII or other security guardrails while pushing changes? This is a good question. I talked about application security, and we talked a little bit about regulated environments. There's a couple of things I'll mention here. So you can definitely put in guardrails as part of policies for dealing with PII. That's probably the first way that I would handle that is put in a policies that says, this database shouldn't be accessed, or this type of information shouldn't be shared. This credit card sequence of numbers should never be used. Or there's policies that we have in place for all of those things. And of course, every company is going to be a little different, so they're flexible enough. You can create your own policy to make sure that that's not happening. Flexibility is key. That's why we offer, YAML. You can do pipelines as code, for example. And so yeah, it's very flexible. Putting in those policies for that information that shouldn't be shared is not difficult, and it definitely should be part of a check at some point and as part of your pipeline for sure. Um, just looking at the questions here. One more. How do you navigate a testing team who wants to test every permutation of feature flag, basically? If we have multiple feature flags in flight, we need to ensure turning them off is going to work just because it's coded behind if else there are still things that can go wrong. I'm going to have to interpret this one a little bit. Um, if you need a tool that supports being able to test every permutation. It's so obviously there's going to have to be a conversation about how much testing can take place. I'm assuming this is a velocity question, right? Like, oh, we haven't tested this particular use case or this particular thing, so we can't move forward yet. You can run multiple tests at once. You can have multiple feature flags turned on. You can have multiple segments turned on. You can have multiple treatments turned on, and you can be doing multiple experimentation turned on. There was a demo I did the other day where we showed all the different permutations that we had running at the same time, and I think it was 256. I don't know if there's an upper limit, but there was 256 different things being tested, and then automatically we were able to decide which one of those was working and which ones weren't, and then we were able to progress that rollout very quickly and determine what the best one that basically won the evaluation contest, so that we could roll that out more broadly. So I know that we can do it at Harness. Hopefully your experimentation tool is able to do that as well. And hopefully it's integrated with the rest of your pipeline to make that process easy. Okay, I think we're about out of time, and I think that's all the questions we have for today. So thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me. Really appreciate it. I hope I get to talk to you on one of these in the future, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.